The morning of September 14th, 2001 began like any other for Jack Morrison. The 58-year-old fisherman had awakened before dawn in his small cabin on the Mendocino coast, California, prepared his equipment, and driven to his favorite spot on the rocky cliffs. What he didn't know was that this would be the morning that would forever change two families, reopen an international investigation, and finally bring answers to a mystery that had haunted the cruise industry for 9 long years. When Jack cast his line that foggy morning, with mist still dancing over the Pacific Ocean, he never imagined that his bait would catch onto something that wasn't a fish. Something that had been pushed by currents since March 1992. Something that two desperate families and the American Coast Guard had searched for tirelessly for almost a decade. Welcome to another episode of True Crime. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, subscribe now and activate the notification bell so you don't miss any cases. Today I'm going to tell you a story that proves that sometimes the answers we seek are adrift in the vast ocean, hidden in the silent depths of the Pacific. Prepare yourselves, because what you're about to discover about the disappearance of Sarah and Michael Thompson aboard the cruise ship Ocean Majesty will leave you speechless. This case has mystery, international investigation, and a discovery that will make you question everything you thought you knew about safety on the high seas. Sarah Elizabeth Mitchell and Michael James Thompson weren't just a couple in love. They were the kind of people who restore our faith in humanity. In March 1992, Sarah was 28 years old, and Michael was 31, and they were embarking on what should have been their dream-delayed honeymoon aboard the luxurious cruise ship Ocean Majesty. Sarah was a woman of striking natural beauty. At 5 feet 5 inches tall, with wavy, brown hair that gleamed golden under the California sun, and green eyes that seemed to capture light in a unique way. But it wasn't just her appearance that caught attention. Sarah had that kind of smile that made people instantly feel at home. That contagious laugh that echoed through the corridors of Riverside Elementary School in Sacramento, where she had been teaching 3rd grade for 5 years. Michael, in turn, was the perfect complement to Sarah. Tall, at 6 feet tall, with dark hair, always perfectly combed, and a pair of glasses that gave him a distinguished intellectual air. His brown eyes were kind but determined, reflecting the passion he felt for education. As a high school history teacher in Sacramento, Michael had the rare gift of bringing the past to life for his teenage students. The couple had met 4 years earlier, in 1988, during an education conference in San Francisco. Sarah was presenting a project on innovative literacy methods, while Michael was discussing how to make American history more relevant to the modern generation. They met during the coffee break, started talking about education, and 3 hours later were still sitting in the hotel cafeteria, completely absorbed in each other. The courtship was a modern fairy tale. Both lived in Sacramento, but in different neighborhoods, Sarah in Midtown, Michael in East Sacramento. They met every weekend, exploring the city together, visiting museums, having picnics in McKinley Park, always talking about their dreams of making education more accessible and engaging. They married in June 1990, in an intimate but moving ceremony at St. Francis Catholic Church in Sacramento. About 80 people attended, families, teacher colleagues, some former students who adored them. Sarah wore her mother's wedding dress, altered by the local seamstress, and Michael couldn't stop smiling throughout the entire ceremony. The original honeymoon was modest, a week at an inn, in Carmel by the Sea. But they promised each other that someday they would take the dream honeymoon. This dream finally became reality in March 1992. After 2 years of carefully saving part of their teacher salaries, Sarah and Michael finally had enough money for the cruise they had planned since their engagement. The Ocean Majesty was one of the most luxurious ships in the Coastal Paradise Cruises fleet, with capacity for 1,200 passengers and 450 crew members. The 7-day itinerary included departure from Los Angeles, with stops in San Francisco, Monterey, and Santa Barbara, before returning to the port of origin. In 1992, they lived in a small 2-bedroom apartment in Midtown Sacramento, decorated with plants that Sarah religiously cared for and shelves full of history books that Michael collected. Every morning, she woke up 15 minutes earlier just to water her plants before getting ready for work. Michael, in turn, had the habit of preparing coffee for both of them and reading the Sacramento Bee aloud during breakfast, commenting on the day's news with Sarah. Their routine was predictable and comforting. They left home together at 7:45 in the morning in the blue 1987 Honda Civic they had bought used right after the wedding. Michael would drop Sarah off at the elementary school first, then drive 10 minutes to the high school where he taught. In the afternoons, he always picked her up, and they would return home together, talking about the day's events, planning the next day's classes, dreaming about the future. Sarah loved children and dreamed of being a mother. She and Michael had been trying to get pregnant for a year, and she kept a diary where she wrote down her hopes and fears about motherhood. Michael, despite being more reserved about the subject, let his excitement show when he talked about teaching his future child about American history, or taking his future daughter camping in the Sierra Nevada mountains. On weekends, the couple had sacred rituals. Saturday mornings were for visiting the farmers' market in downtown Sacramento, where they bought organic products and discovered new types of artisanal cheese. Sunday afternoons, after Mass, they took walks along the American River Parkway, always bringing a camera to photograph wildlife and each other. Their work colleagues adored them. Sarah organized science fairs that became events for the whole family, and Michael sponsored the school's debate club in his spare time. They actively participated in church, regularly contributed to educational charities, and their apartment was always open to young teacher colleagues who needed advice or just a home-cooked meal. The March 1992 cruise represented more than just a vacation for Sarah and Michael. It was the celebration of 2 years of successful marriage, the fulfillment of a promise made at the altar, and the prelude to the next phase of their lives together, having children and perhaps buying a small house in the Sacramento suburbs. Sarah had spent weeks planning every detail of the trip. She bought new dresses for the formal dinners, researched all the activities available on board, even made appointments at the ship's spa for her and Michael to enjoy couples massages. Michael, in turn, was eager to completely disconnect from work. He promised Sarah that he wouldn't bring any history books. No tests to grade, just the 2 novels she had recommended. It was impossible to imagine that 2 people so careful in planning, so responsible in their professional lives, so connected to each other, could simply disappear from a moving ship in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. But that's exactly what happened on the 3rd night of the cruise, when they were last seen on Deck 10 of the Ocean Majesty, watching the stars after dinner, and were never found alive again. March 17, 1992. Tuesday, 3rd day of the 7-day Ocean Majesty cruise. The ship sailed serenely through the Pacific, approximately 45 nautical miles off the coast of Monterey, California. The temperature was pleasant at 21 degrees Celsius, with gentle winds of 8 knots coming from the northwest. The sea was calm, classified as State 2 on the Beaufort scale. Ideal conditions for navigation. Sarah Thompson woke up at 7:30 in the morning in cabin 8002, 147, one of the accommodations with a balcony on Deck 8. The cabin had cost $3,200 for the 7 days, a significant amount for 2 teachers, but which they had carefully saved for 2 years, specifically for this delayed honeymoon. Michael was already awake, standing on the cabin's private balcony, watching the dolphins that followed the ship as they did every morning. "Good morning, my mermaid," said Michael when Sarah joined him on the balcony, wearing the white terry cloth robe provided by the ship. It was a private joke between them. Michael always said that Sarah looked like a mermaid when her wavy hair danced in the ocean wind. At 8:15, they went down to the Deck 9 buffet for breakfast. Sarah wore a light yellow summer dress with small white flowers, comfortable low sandals, and a straw hat she had bought specifically for the cruise. Michael wore khaki shorts, a navy blue polo shirt, and white sneakers, the relaxed look he could rarely wear during the school year. During breakfast, they chatted animatedly about the day's plans. The ship would make a 6-hour stop in Monterey, and they had booked a shore excursion to visit the famous Monterey Bay Aquarium. Sarah was particularly excited to see the jellyfish, while Michael wanted to photograph the sea otters in the bay. At 8:47, they were seen in the buffet line by Margaret Foster, a 68-year-old retiree from Portland who was taking the E-Dury cruise with 2 friends. Margaret would later describe to investigators that Sarah was radiant and laughing at something Michael had whispered in her ear, and that the couple seemed hopelessly in love. The Ocean Majesty docked at Monterey Port at 9:30 in the morning. Sarah and Michael were among the first passengers to disembark for the excursion at 9:45. The aquarium excursion was scheduled to last 4 hours, with return to the ship at 2:30 in the afternoon. During the aquarium visit, they were photographed several times by other tourists. One of these photos, later provided to authorities by a couple from Denver, showed Sarah and Michael holding hands in front of the main shark tank at 11:23 in the morning. Sarah was pointing to a hammerhead shark, and Michael was looking at her with an expression of pure adoration. Robert Chen, the excursion guide, clearly remembered the couple. They asked many intelligent questions about marine life, he told investigators. Mrs. Thompson, Sarah, was fascinated by the reproductive processes of seahorses. Mr. Thompson photographed practically everything, always making sure his wife was in the photos. The excursion ended punctually at 2:15 in the afternoon. Sarah and Michael bought some souvenirs at the aquarium gift shop, a dolphin-shaped keychain for Sarah, and a book on marine conservation for Michael. They returned to the excursion bus at 2:22 and arrived back at the Ocean Majesty at 2:34. At 2:41, they passed through the ship's security checkpoint, showing their passenger identification cards to Security Officer Tony Martinez. Martinez was one of the last people to see them during the day. He remembered that Sarah was carrying a small gift bag and that Michael seemed to be telling some funny story because Sarah was laughing. The ship departed from Monterey at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, heading to the next destination, Santa Barbara. The night navigation would take approximately 8 hours, with arrival scheduled for dawn the next day. During the afternoon, Sarah and Michael returned to the cabin to rest and prepare for the evening activities. At 5:30, Sarah called her parents in Sacramento using the cabin phone, a call that cost $4.50 per minute, but which she had insisted on including in the trip budget. "Mom, you won't believe the beauty of this place," Sarah told Eleanor Mitchell during the EETI 8-minute call. "Michael took over 100 photos just today. We're having so much fun. I've never felt so relaxed." Eleanor would later tell investigators that it was the last time she would hear her daughter's voice. At 7 o'clock in the evening, Sarah and Michael dined at the ship's main restaurant, the Oceanic Dining Room on Deck 4. They were served by Filipino waiter Emmanuel Santos, who remembered them well because Sarah had made a point of learning his name and asking about his family in the Philippines. They ordered grilled salmon and shared a bottle of California white wine, Santos testified later. The lady always thanked me in Tagalog. She had learned some words to impress me. They were very kind, very much in love. They held hands throughout the entire meal. After dinner, at 8:45, they attended the show in the main theater, a presentation of music from the 1950s and 60s. They sat in row J, seats 15 and 16. The Mayday passenger sitting next to them, Linda Morrison, no relation to fisherman Jack Morrison, briefly chatted with Sarah during intermission about how romantic it was to take a cruise as a delayed honeymoon. The show ended at 10:15 at night. Sarah and Michael were seen leaving the theater, walking hand in hand toward the elevators. They decided to go up to Deck 10, the ship's highest observation deck, to admire the stars before sleeping. At 10:28 at night, they were seen for the last time by a living person. Jennifer Walsh, a 34-year-old nurse from San Diego, who was taking the cruise alone after a recent divorce, was on Deck 10 reading a book under one of the lights when she saw Sarah and Michael approaching the starboard railing, right side of the ship. They were embracing, looking at the stars, Jennifer told investigators. Sarah was pointing to different constellations, and Michael was taking photos of the night sky with flash. They seemed completely at peace, completely in love. I remember thinking that's how true love should be. Jennifer left the deck at 10:35 to go to sleep. Sarah and Michael remained at the railing, alone under the starry Pacific sky. They were never seen alive again. The first indication that something was wrong came at 7:45 in the morning on March 18th. Sarah and Michael had missed breakfast, which was unusual for a couple who had maintained a strict routine during the first 3 days of the Ihaidit cruise. Even more alarming, they didn't show up for the Santa Barbara excursion for which they had signed up and paid $89 each. At 9:15 in the morning, the ship's receptionist, Carol Stevens, knocked on the door of cabin 8247. There was no response. Using the MasterCard, she opened the door for a welfare check and found the cabin empty. The bed had not been unmade, the previous day's clothes were still on the floor, and the bathroom. Towels were dry, indicating that no one had showered in the morning. Even more disturbing, Sarah and Michael's passenger identification cards were on the cabin's small table, along with the electronic door key. On the cruise, these cards were essential for everything: entering and leaving the cabin, making purchases on board, even identifying oneself in case of emergency. Passengers would never leave them behind voluntarily. At 9:23, Carol Stevens alerted her supervisor, customer. Service Director Marcus Rodriguez. Rodriguez immediately initiated a discreet search of the ship, instructing staff to look for the couple without alarming other passengers. For 2 hours, the crew systematically searched every deck, every lounge, every public area of the Ocean Majesty. They checked the gym, restaurants, shops, casino, bars, even service areas normally restricted to passengers. Sarah and Michael Thompson seemed to have simply vanished from the ship. At 11:45 in the morning, Captain Eduardo Ramirez, a 23-year veteran navigating cruises, was informed of the situation. Ramirez, a serious 52-year-old man who had commanded the Ocean Majesty for 4 years, immediately recognized the gravity of the situation. The standard protocol for missing passengers was clear: search the ship completely, check all electronic records of passenger card movements, and, if necessary, alert the United States Coast Guard. But Ramirez had a terrible feeling. In his 23 years at sea, He knew that when passengers disappeared without a trace, there was rarely a happy ending. The first crucial clue came from analyzing electronic records. The ship's security system automatically recorded whenever passenger cards were used to enter or exit cabins. The records showed that Sarah and Michael had used their cards to enter cabin 8,247 at 6:17 in the evening on the 17th, before preparing for dinner. After that, there were no more records of card use. This meant they had left the cabin for dinner without taking the cards. Unusual, but not impossible. Many passengers left cards in the cabin when they went to dinner, especially if they planned to return directly after the meal. At 12:30 in the afternoon, Captain Ramirez made the decision to alert the Coast Guard. The Ocean Majesty was approximately 12 nautical miles off the coast of Santa Barbara, still in American territorial waters. The Coast Guard officer who received the call, Lieutenant Commander Patricia Hayes from the Santa Barbara station, immediately classified the situation as Maritime Emergency Category 1. The search and rescue operation began at 1:15. Two HH-60 Jayhawk Coast Guard helicopters took off from Point Mugu Air Base, while patrol ship USCGC Blackfin altered course to intercept the Ocean Majesty. Simultaneously, all vessels in the area were alerted via maritime radio to watch for people in the IT water. The protocol required that the Ocean Majesty reverse its route and retrace the previous night's journey, searching for any sign of Sarah and Michael in the waters the ship had passed through. For 6 agonizing hours, the crews sailed slowly along the same route, with passengers and crew scanning the ocean with binoculars. But the Pacific Ocean is vast and unforgiving. In March, the water temperature was around 14 degrees Celsius, cold enough to cause hypothermia within hours. Ocean currents in the region are complex and unpredictable, capable of dragging objects or people miles away in just a few hours. While the search continued at sea, the investigation aboard revealed disturbing details. A more detailed inspection of cabin 8,247 showed that the private balcony was unlocked. The sliding door was closed, but not locked. The balcony railing was 1.2 meters high, sufficient to prevent accidental falls, but not impossible to climb over. Even more intriguing were the belongings found in the cabin. Michael's camera was on the bed, with the last film still inside. Photos from the Monterey Aquarium and some attempts to photograph the stars the previous night. Sarah's purse was open on the armchair, with her intimate diary visible. The last entry, dated March 17th, said, "I've never felt so happy. Michael is so relaxed, so romantic. This trip is being everything we dreamed of. I can't wait to tell the children about the aquarium when we return to classes." The investigation of other passengers brought more questions than answers. Jennifer Walsh, the nurse who was the last to see the couple alive, was extensively interviewed by ship security officer Thomas Chen. "They seemed completely normal, completely happy," she repeated. "There was nothing that suggested problems, depression, or any kind of emotional disturbance." As the night of March 18th approached, it became clear that the maritime search would not find Sarah and Michael alive. The Coast Guard had covered more than 200 square nautical miles of ocean using sonar technology and thermal cameras. No trace of the couple was found. At 7:45, 24 hours after the last sighting, the active search was officially suspended. The Ocean Majesty received authorization to continue its itinerary, but the atmosphere aboard had changed completely. Passengers walked through the corridors in silence, many canceling planned activities out of respect for the missing couple. The cruise that should have been Sarah and Michael Thompson's dream honeymoon had transformed into an investigation of possible double homicide or incomprehensible tragedy on the high seas. And for two families in Sacramento, the nightmare was just beginning. 9 years, 3,287 days of torturous uncertainty. For the families of Sarah and Michael Thompson, each dawn brought the same cruel hope followed by the same devastating disappointment when the phone didn't ring with news, when investigators had no new leads about what had happened on that fatal night on the Ocean Majesty. Eleanor Mitchell never stopped searching. At 54 years old in 1992, she became an obsessed amateur investigator, transforming her home office in Sacramento into an improvised command center. The walls were covered with nautical charts of the California coast, marked with ocean currents and drift, patterns calculated by oceanographers. Photographs of Sarah and Michael looked from every available surface. Sarah laughing during college graduation, Michael adjusting his tie on their wedding day, the two waving from the deck of the Ocean Majesty on the first day of the cruise. Every week, religiously, Eleanor contacted Coastal Paradise Cruises, the Coast Guard, and even international maritime search organizations. She paid out of her own pocket to hire private investigators specialized in maritime cases, spending more than $40,000 of her retirement savings over 9 years. Harold Mitchell, Sarah's father, dealt with pain differently. He became obsessed with statistics of cruise ship disappearances, collecting data from every similar incident reported worldwide since 1985. His research revealed a disturbing pattern. Between 1990 and 2000, at least 312 people disappeared from cruise ships in international waters, and less than 30% of cases were satisfactorily solved. Dorothy Thompson, Michael's mother, could never see the ocean again. The 62-year-old widow had moved from the apartment in Sacramento to a house in inland California, away from any reminder of salt water. She developed a deep aversion to anything related to the sea, couldn't watch movies with ocean scenes, avoided seafood restaurants, even changed channels when cruise commercials appeared on television. The Sacramento educational community never forgot Sarah and Michael. The two schools where they taught established permanent memorials, a garden with benches at Riverside Elementary in honor of Sarah, and a renovated library at the high school in memory of Michael. Every year, on the anniversary of the disappearance, colleagues and former students gathered to share memories of the beloved couple. The FBI officially took over the investigation in April 1992, 1 month after the disappearance, classifying the case as possible homicide in federal waters. Special Agent Robert Chen, based in the San Francisco office, was assigned as the lead investigator. Chen, a specialist in maritime crimes with 15 years of experience, immediately recognized that the Thompson case would be one of the most challenging of his career. The initial investigation focused on 3 main theories. The first was double suicide. Perhaps Sarah and Michael were facing personal problems unknown to their families and decided to end their lives together. But this theory was quickly discarded. Friends, family, work colleagues, and even strangers who interacted with the couple during the cruise consistently testified about their obvious happiness and plans for the future. The second theory was accident. Perhaps they had fallen from their cabin balcony or from the observation deck during the night. Analysis by naval engineers showed that while it was technically possible, it would be extremely difficult for 2 people to accidentally fall from the safety areas of the Ocean Majesty. The railings were adequate height, and there were no adverse weather conditions that night. The third theory, and the most disturbing, was homicide. But who would kill a couple of teachers on their honeymoon? And how? The Ocean Majesty was carrying 1,200 passengers and 450 crew members on that voyage. Every person aboard was interviewed by the FBI during the months following the tragedy. No one reported seeing or hearing anything suspicious on the night of March 17th to 18th. An intriguing discovery emerged in 1994, 2 years after the disappearance. A detailed review of the ship's security recordings, the tapes were preserved for only 18 months, almost lost, revealed a blurred image of two figures on deck, 10 at 10:47 at night. 19 minutes after the last confirmed sighting of the couple by Jennifer Walsh. The figures in the recording were impossible to identify due to the inferior quality of 1992 cameras and inadequate lighting on the night deck. FBI video analysis experts spent months trying to enhance the images, but could only confirm that there were two people of approximately similar height to Sarah and Michael in the area where they were last seen. Even more frustrating, the recording showed the figures approaching the ship's railing, but image quality deteriorated at exactly the critical moment. The next camera in the security system was located 50 meters ahead and didn't capture the figures in movement, suggesting that whatever had happened occurred in those 50 meters of unmonitored area. Over the years, various conspiracy theories and supposed sightings emerged that fed cruel hopes. In 1995, a man in Mexico claimed to have seen Sarah working as a volunteer at an orphanage in Tijuana, but investigation revealed it was someone else. 1997, a woman called the FBI claiming that Michael was alive and working as a fisherman in a small village in Oregon. But when agents investigated, they discovered it was a case of mistaken identity. The most persistent theory, discussed in internet forums and TV shows about mysteries, was that Sarah and Michael had been victims of a perfect murder, assassinated by someone aboard who then disposed of the bodies in the ocean. Some speculated about crew involvement, others about passengers with false identities. But tangible evidence supporting any of these theories was never found. Coastal Paradise Cruises suffered significant impact from the case. Although the company fully cooperated with investigations and implemented additional safety protocols, negative publicity resulted in booking cancellations and lawsuits. The Mitchell family filed a $2 million lawsuit against the company, alleging security negligence. The case was settled out of court in TD 1996 for an undisclosed amount. Agent Chen retired from the FBI in 2001, but admitted that the Thompson case haunted him. They were genuinely good people, doing something as simple as celebrating their love, he said in a 2000 interview. The idea that someone can simply disappear from a ship with more than 1,600 people aboard defies everything we know about criminal investigation. It was as if the ocean had simply swallowed them. Harold Mitchell died of pancreatic cancer in 1999, at 67 years old. Eleanor always believed that the pain of not knowing what had happened to Sarah contributed to his illness. At the funeral, she held a photo of Sarah and Michael taken on the first day of the cruise, whispering, "Daddy went to find you, dears. He'll take care of you until I arrive." In 2001, 9 years after the disappearance, the case was officially classified as inactive by the FBI, not closed, but with no resources being actively dedicated to the investigation. Eleanor, now 63 years old, and with her health weakened by years of stress and pain, had stopped hiring private investigators. She maintained a small shrine in the living room with photos of Sarah and Michael, but recognized that she would probably never know the truth about what had happened to her daughter. Life continued in the world of cruises, as life always continues. New ships were built with more advanced security systems, new families embarked on dreamed honeymoons, new couples fell in love under the stars on observation decks. But for those familiar with the Thompson case, there was a dark awareness that the ocean keeps its secrets, and that sometimes good people simply disappear without explanation. And then came September 2001. Jack Morrison woke up at 4:45 in the morning on September 14th, 2001, as he had every Friday for 15 years. At 58 years old, the retired fisherman lived alone in a small wooden cabin on the cliffs of Mendocino, California, approximately 180 miles north of San Francisco. His morning fishing routine had become a personal religion after his wife Marie died of cancer in 1986. The morning was exceptionally foggy, with a dense mist that transformed the ocean into a ghostly landscape. Jack prepared his usual equipment: carbon fiber fishing rod, box of artificial lures, thermos with hot coffee, and walked down the steep trail to his favorite spot, a rocky promontory that projected about 15 meters over the turbulent waters of the Pacific. What Jack didn't know was that ocean currents had subtly shifted during the night. A low-pressure system off the coast was creating unusual current patterns, pushing objects and debris that normally remained in deep waters toward the rocky coast of Northern California. At 6:15, with the fog beginning to dissipate under the first golden rays of sun, Jack cast his line for the first time. He was using a chrome artificial lure, a small silver fish that had proven effective for rockfish in the region. The line descended approximately 30 meters into the water, reaching the cold currents that flowed along the submerged rocks. For an hour, Jack fished in relative peace. He caught 2 small rockfish, which he returned to the water according to his practice of fishing only for sport. The sun was completely visible now, creating a golden path on the ocean surface that extended to the infinite horizon. At 7:18 in the morning, something changed. Jack felt a different weight on the line, not the energetic fight of a fish, but something heavy and inert that seemed to be stuck or tangled in something larger. "Probably seaweed," he muttered to himself, beginning to reel in the line carefully to avoid it breaking. But as he pulled, the weight seemed to increase progressively. And there was something about the resistance that didn't feel like marine vegetation or natural debris. It was something that offered resistance in a strange way, something that seemed to have density and substance different from anything he had fished in 15 years. At 7:25, Jack saw the first dark shapes emerging from the blue-green depths. His first reaction was confusion. There seemed to be something large and dark slowly rising toward the surface. And then, when the fog completely dissipated and the first direct rays of sun illuminated the crystal-clear water, Jack Morrison saw something that made him drop his fishing rod and stagger backward, almost falling from the rocky promontory. Slowly emerging from the Pacific waters, caught on his fishing line, was what were clearly human remains. Not just one body, but 2 skeletons partially preserved by the cold salt water, still wearing fragments of colorful clothing, in a position that suggested they had remained together even in death. But there was something more, something that made Jack's heart race when he realized its importance. Attached to one of the skeletons, partially corroded but still legible, was a piece of blue laminated plastic, a cruise ship passenger identification card. Jack, with hands trembling violently from shock and adrenaline, managed to pull out his cell phone and dial 911. His voice was so altered that the operator initially had difficulty understanding his words. There are bodies in the water," he managed to stammer. "2 skeletons. And a card. A cruise card. I think they're those people who disappeared years ago." The first unit from the Mendocino County Sheriff's Department arrived at the cliffs at 7:52, followed quickly by paramedics, the Aquatic Rescue Unit, and Chief Investigator Detective Michael Torres, no relation to the Detective Torres from the previous case. Torres had heard about the Thompson case during FBI training on maritime crimes and immediately recognized the potential importance of the discovery. The scene Torres found on the rocks was simultaneously horrifying and strangely peaceful. The two skeletons, preserved by the cold and saline waters of the Pacific for 9 years, were positioned in a way that suggested they had died embracing. The arms of one skeleton were around the other, in a pose that even death and the ocean couldn't separate. Even more revealing were the fragments of clothing and personal objects that remained attached to the bones. Pieces of a light yellow dress with small white flowers, remains of a navy blue polo shirt, and most importantly, attached to what remained of the smaller skeleton's left hand, there was a white gold wedding ring with a small solitaire diamond, exactly like the ring Sarah Thompson wore in all the photographs provided by the families in 1992. But the most crucial discovery was the passenger identification card, partially preserved by the laminated plastic. Although some parts were illegible due to 9 years of corrosion in the ocean, the name Thompson was still vaguely visible, as well as part of the Coastal Paradise Cruises logo. The recovery operation took 6 hours. Specialized Coast Guard divers were called to document the exact position of the remains and search for additional evidence in the waters around the promontory. At 25 meters deep, they found other objects that confirmed growing suspicions: a camera severely damaged by salt water, fragments of a leather purse, and pieces of metal that appeared to be from jewelry. Preliminary forensic evidence painted a devastating but clarifying picture. The skeletons had been in the water for approximately 9 years. The cold and saline conditions of the North Pacific had preserved more bone material and tissue than would be normal in warmer waters. More importantly, initial analysis revealed no obvious signs of physical trauma to the bones, suggesting that Sarah and Michael had not been victims of extreme violence. The discovery also revealed crucial information about ocean currents in the region. Oceanography experts calculated that objects entering the Pacific, in the area where the Ocean Majesty sailed in March 1992, could, under specific current and wind conditions, eventually be pushed north along the coast over a period of years, especially if they got caught in deep cold water currents. But the discovery raised as many questions as it answered. If Sarah and Michael died in the ocean in March 1992, how did their bodies remain together for 9 years of unpredictable ocean currents? And what exactly happened on that fatal night on Deck 10 of the Ocean Majesty? One thing was certain. After 3,287 days of torment and uncertainty, the families of Sarah and Michael Thompson finally knew where their loved ones were. The search had ended, but the deeper questions about that tragic night were just beginning to be answered. The discovery of Sarah and Michael Thompson's remains in Mendocino waters in September 2001 brought answers that two families desperately needed, but also raised questions that remain unsolved to this day, more than 2 decades after that fateful night on the Ocean Majesty. Detailed forensic analysis, conducted by Dr. Patricia Valdez of the Coast Guard Forensic Medicine Laboratory in Alameda, revealed crucial details about the couple's final moments. The skeletons showed signs consistent with drowning in salt water. There were no fractures indicating trauma from impact against rocks or the ship's hull, nor evidence of extreme physical violence. The position of the bodies, still embracing even after 9 years of ocean currents, suggested that Sarah and Michael had faced their final moments together, aware of what was happening. Even more revealing was the state of tissues preserved by the cold Pacific water. Lung fragments contained marine sediments and diatoms, ocean microorganisms, confirming that both were alive when they entered the water. This discovery devastated the families, but also provided a strange form of comfort. Sarah and Michael hadn't suffered prolonged violence and had remained united until the end. Analysis of the personal objects found revealed equally disturbing information. Michael's camera, although severely damaged by saltwater corrosion, still contained fragments of the film from the last night. Navy criminal laboratory technicians managed to partially recover 3 images. 2 showed Sarah smiling on the ship's deck under the stars, and a third, blurred and difficult to interpret, seemed to show an unidentified figure approaching the couple. This third photograph became the center of intense forensic debate. FBI image analysis experts spent months trying to enhance the quality, but deterioration caused by 9 years of salt water exposure made any definitive identification impossible. The figure in the image could be another passenger, a crew member, or even a shadow created by the deck lighting. Special Agent Robert Chen, who had resumed the case after his retirement as an independent consultant, developed the most plausible theory based on the available evidence. He believed that Sarah and Michael had been approached on Deck 10 by someone they knew, explaining why there were no signs of struggle or panic in the etui. Blurred 1994 security images. The position of the bodies when they were found suggests that they jumped or were pushed into the water while still conscious and together, Chen explained at a press conference in 2002. The fact that they remained embracing indicates they had time to embrace before entering the water, suggesting a moment of conscious farewell, whether by their own choice or under coercion. An alternative theory, proposed by oceanographer Dr. Lisa Martinez from the Scripps Institution of Oceanography, focused on the scientific aspects of the case. Her research on ocean currents in the region revealed a rare phenomenon called maritime embrace. When 2 bodies enter the water simultaneously, specific currents and saltwater density can create a vortex that keeps objects close together for long periods. The North Pacific has very specific currents in the region where the Ocean Majesty sailed, Dr. Martinez explained. If 2 people entered the water in that specific area in March when winter currents were still active, it's scientifically plausible that they would remain together for years, especially if they got caught in a deep, cold water current that flows north along the continental shelf. But perhaps the most disturbing revelation came from an unexpected source. In 2003, 2 years after the discovery, a former Ocean Majesty crew member named Carlos Mendez approached the FBI with information he had kept for 11 years. Mendez, who worked as a waiter at the Deck 10 bar in 1992, admitted to seeing Sarah and Michael talking with an unidentified man on the night of the disappearance. It was approximately 10:50 at night, Mendez testified. I was closing the bar when I saw the Thompson couple. I knew them because they were always very kind to me, talking with a taller man, wearing a dark blazer. It seemed like a normal conversation, nothing aggressive. But when I returned 5 minutes later to get the last glasses, all 3 had disappeared. Mendez explained that he hadn't reported the sighting in 1992 because it didn't seem relevant at the time, and later was afraid of being blamed for not speaking immediately. His description of the third man was vague. Approximately 6 feet 1 inches tall, dark hair, between 35 and 45 years old, possibly American, but with a slight accent he couldn't identify. The renewed investigation focused on identifying this mysterious third man, but the Ocean Majesty passenger records from 1992 listed more than 180 men who vaguely fit the description. Many had died in the 11 following years, others had moved to different countries, and some simply couldn't be located. An intriguing clue emerged when investigators discovered that 3 cruise passengers had provided false information during check-in, using non-existent addresses or documents that couldn't be verified later. This practice was more common in 1992, before post-September 11th security protocols, but raised the possibility that someone aboard was deliberately hiding their identity. The most disturbing theory, developed by a panel of maritime crime experts in 2005, suggested that Sarah and Michael may have been victims of a cruise predator, a rare type of criminal who specifically chooses cruise ships as locations for crimes due to complex legal jurisdiction in international waters and the ease of disposing of evidence in the ocean. Cruises are unique environments for sophisticated criminals, explained criminologist Dr. James Patterson from Georgetown University. Thousands of unknown people in confined space, abundant alcohol, relaxed atmosphere where people lower their defenses, and the infinite ocean as a means of eliminating evidence. For someone with malicious intentions, it's an almost ideal environment. The investigation revealed that between 1985 and 2000, at least 47 people disappeared from cruise ships under circumstances similar to the Thompson case. Couples or individuals who were last seen on observation decks during nighttime hours, with no signs of struggle or prior emotional disturbance. The impact of the discovery on the families was profoundly complex. Eleanor Mitchell, now 63 years old, and with health weakened by years of anxiety, expressed contradictory feelings in an interview with the Sacramento Bee in 2002. For 9 years, I wondered if my daughter was suffering somewhere, if she was being held against her will. Knowing that she and Michael were together at the end, that they didn't suffer for years, brings a terrible but necessary peace. But I still torture myself thinking about what really happened that night. Dorothy Thompson had a more bitter reaction. They were too young, too good for this world, she said. Whoever did this didn't just steal 2 precious lives, but also stole all the children they would have had, all the students they would have inspired in the next 40 years, all the good they would have done for the world. The case officially remains open, classified as suspicious death in federal waters, with active investigation suspended. The FBI maintains an active file on the case, and new evidence or witnesses are always welcome. But the reality is that after more than 2 decades, the chances of resolution diminish constantly. The cruise industry implemented significant changes as a direct result of the Thompson case and others similar. Security systems were drastically improved, including high-definition cameras with night vision on all decks, motion sensors in isolated areas, and more rigorous protocols for tracking passenger movements during nighttime hours. Coastal Paradise Cruises, which operated the Ocean Majesty, went bankrupt in 2008, partially due to legal costs from multiple lawsuits related to security incidents. The Ocean Majesty itself was sold and reconfigured as a cargo ship in 2004, definitively ending its career as a luxury cruise ship. Jack Morrison, the fisherman who made the fateful discovery, never fished in Mendocino waters again. I see those 2 young people every time I close my eyes, he said in a 2010 interview. They looked so peaceful together, even after all those years in the ocean. I hope they found some peace, wherever they are now. Today, more than 30 years after their disappearance, Sarah and Michael Thompson are remembered through the Sarah and Michael Thompson Maritime Safety Foundation, established by their families in 2006. The foundation works to implement better safety protocols in the cruise industry and provides resources for families of people missing in international waters. A memorial plaque was installed at the Itwaithi promontory in Mendocino, where their remains were discovered. The simple inscription says, Sarah Elizabeth Thompson, 1964 to 1992, and Michael James Thompson, 1961 to 1992. Teachers, spouses, soulmates. May the ocean that took them have also finally reunited them in eternal peace. The mystery of who took them that night and why may never be solved. The Pacific waters guard their secrets zealously, and the third man seen by Carlos, Mendez, remains a shadow without identity. But the truth about who Sarah and Michael Thompson were, two extraordinarily dedicated people who loved deeply, taught with passion, and died embracing under the Pacific stars, that truth will remain forever engraved in the hearts of all who knew them. Sometimes, the most important answers aren't about how a story ends, but about how it was lived. And the story of Sarah and Michael Thompson, even in its tragic brevity, was lived with a beauty and purpose that continue to inspire people decades after their death. This is the true legacy of the teacher couple who disappeared on the Ocean Majesty cruise in 1992. Not the mystery of their death, but the certainty of their eternal love.